The ballroom glittered with pride and power. Under the chandelier's glow, Ethan Hale lifted a crystal glass, the ink of a brand new $100 million contract still drying beneath his signature. "Tonight," he boomed, "Hale Constructs becomes unstoppable." Applause crashed like thunder. Cameras flashed, and beside him, half invisible in the glare, stood Isabel Hale, the wife who'd built his dreams quietly from the shadows. He smiled for reporters, whispering through his teeth, "Stand straight, don't ruin this." She did, until her eyes caught the company name at the top of the contract, Carter Infrastructure Group, her late father's legacy. Hours later, at home, the champagne had turned bitter. "You embarrassed me," Ethan shouted, tearing off his tie. "I've outgrown this marriage." He opened the mansion door and tossed her suitcase onto the porch. "You're done here, Isabel. I don't need you anymore." Neighbors watched as he slammed the door, his new advisor, Clara Monroe, smirking in the doorway. Isabel stood barefoot on the marble steps, clutching a sealed letter her father left for the day she was betrayed. Through the trembling silence, she whispered, "Congratulations, Ethan. You just made the most expensive mistake of your life." Because the $100 million contract he bragged about, the one he believed had made him untouchable, was signed, funded, and owned by her. Sometimes arrogance wins applause before it meets its ruin. Sometimes the woman you throw away is the empire you never knew you served. This is the story of husband won $100 million contract and kicked his wife out unaware she owns the company that gave it. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, please click subscribe. Every single click helps us tell stories of courage and truth. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Because when we share these stories together, we remind each other that even in pain, we can rise. The chandelier blazed like captured sunlight as Ethan Hale raised a champagne glass high above the crowd. "To victory!" he shouted. "To Hale Constructs, the company that just landed a $100 million deal with Carter Infrastructure Group." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. A string quartet played louder. Ethan stood at the center of it all, handsome, proud, and perfectly aware that every eye in the ballroom was on him. He thrived on that attention. Beside him, his wife, Isabel Hale, stood quietly, her dress a soft ivory that shimmered under the light. She smiled for the cameras, though her fingers twisted her wedding ring behind her back. Ethan turned to the crowd again. "I couldn't have done it without the support of my incredible team," he declared. "And of course my wife." The crowd cheered, but his tone had a hint of mockery, a subtle sting that only she felt. From the table nearby, Clara Monroe, Ethan's public relations advisor, leaned close to whisper to Greg Sutton, his CFO. "He'll outgrow her soon," she said with a smirk. "He already has." Greg chuckled. "She looks too soft for this life." Harriet Cole, Ethan's mother, lifted her glass in false pride. "A fine woman," she said sweetly to a neighbor, "but not the type to handle success." Isabel caught those whispers. Every one of them. But she stayed composed, her eyes finding the company logo projected on the big screen, Carter Infrastructure Group. Her heart skipped. Carter, her maiden name, her father's company name. She leaned slightly toward Ethan. "Carter Infrastructure. Is that the same?" He cut her off with a sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry about business you can't understand." The guest laughed at his next toast. He was magnetic, confident, charming. But when his hand squeezed her shoulder too tight for the cameras, the pain made her flinch. Paula King, a socialite in a red gown, whispered to Karen Lewis, the neighbor filming on her phone, "He's handsome, but cruel. You can see it in the way he grips her." Karen nodded. "Still, a woman should know her place. Money changes everything." Isabel forced another smile as the applause rang out again. Ethan basked in it, pride swelling like a tide. And yet, in that glittering room, something inside her quietly broke. When the music dimmed, Ethan leaned close and hissed, "Don't embarrass me tonight. You're lucky I brought you here at all." Her lips parted, but no sound came. That was when Clara stepped closer, hand grazing Ethan's arm. "Congratulations, boss," she said softly. "You deserve every bit of this." Their eyes met for a fraction too long. And in that single, silent second, Isabel understood something devastating. She was no longer part of his world. She was an accessory he would soon discard. She turned toward the balcony, blinking back tears as flashbulbs went off behind her. The wind outside brushed her face, cool and calm. Her heart whispered, "Something about this contract isn't right." Down below, the valet started the car engines, and in the reflection of the glass, she saw Ethan's hand linger on Clara's back as they laughed. Isabel took a slow breath, unaware that the name Carter Infrastructure would soon become the weapon of his downfall. The front door slammed so hard the chandelier trembled. "Do you know what you did tonight?" Ethan Hale roared, tearing off his tuxedo jacket and throwing it onto the floor. His voice carried through the wide marble hall like a storm breaking loose. "You embarrassed me in front of investors." Isabel Hale stood near the stairs, still in her gown, her hands folded together. "I didn't say a word, Ethan," she said softly. "That's exactly the problem," he barked, pacing back and forth. "You stood there like a statue. Do you even understand how business works? You made me look weak." He poured himself a drink, spilling half of it on the counter. His reflection glared back from the mirror, half man, half monster. "Greg said investors were watching how we handled ourselves as a couple," he continued, waving his glass. "You're supposed to represent strength, not pity." From the corner of the room, Harriet Cole, Ethan's mother, crossed her arms. Her diamonds glinted coldly under the light. "He's right, Isabel," she said. "You're too quiet, too timid. A man of Ethan's power needs a woman who lifts his image, not lowers it." Isabel turned to her. "With respect, Mrs. Cole, a marriage isn't an image. It's a partnership." "Partnership?" Harriet scoffed. "My dear, in this family, power is earned by dominance, not by sharing." Before Isabel could respond, Clara Monroe, Ethan's advisor, stepped into the room holding her phone. "Sorry to interrupt," she said smoothly, "but the media wants a quote about tonight's success." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes flicked between husband and wife, like someone feeding off the chaos. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Tell them it was my vision, that I made it happen. They don't need to know about her." Clara smiled faintly. "Understood." A silence heavier than glass filled the room. Isabel's throat tightened. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm proud of you, but you don't have to erase me to rise." He slammed his glass onto the table. "You're holding me back, Isabel. I don't need dead weight right now. I need freedom." The sound of shattering crystal echoed through the hall. Harriet clapped her hands once, satisfied. "Then free yourself, son. Sometimes a man must choose success over sentiment." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're right." He turned to Isabel, eyes burning with arrogance. "I want a divorce." The words hit her like a physical blow. The air left her lungs. "You don't mean that," she managed. "I do. Effective tonight." At that moment, Karen Lewis, the nosy neighbor, appeared at the open doorway, pretending to return a borrowed tray. Her eyes widened. "Everything all right?" she asked, feigning concern. Ethan smiled bitterly. "Perfect timing, Karen. You can witness the end of my mistake." Laughter from Harriet and a low murmur from Clara filled the space. Isabel could barely breathe, her vision blurred as she looked toward the open door, the same door she'd soon be pushed through. Her voice cracked. "You think you built this empire alone, Ethan, but you've forgotten whose foundation you're standing on." He waved dismissively. "Take your melodrama somewhere else." Isabel straightened her spine, her trembling hands hidden behind her back. "One day, you'll realize that arrogance doesn't make a man powerful. It only blinds him." He pointed to the door. "Get out." She didn't move. Her calm scared him more than her tears ever could. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. As she walked up the stairs to pack, the wind outside howled through the half-open balcony, blowing a piece of paper from the desk. A corner of the $100 million contract fluttered to the floor, revealing a signature that made her heart stop. Carter Holdings Trustee Division, her father's legacy, her bloodline, and Ethan had no idea. The sound of the door unlocking was followed by shouting, "Throw her things out!" Ethan Hale's voice thundered through the night. It was almost midnight. Rain had just started to fall, thin drops sliding down the marble steps of the Hale mansion. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, their headlights cutting through the mist like judgmental eyes. Two bodyguards dragged Isabel Hale's suitcase toward the gate. Her silk gown brushed the wet ground as she tried to reach for it. "Ethan, please don't do this in front of everyone." Ethan's laugh was sharp. Everyone should see what happens when someone becomes dead weight in my life. Clara Monroe, his advisor, leaned by the doorway holding a champagne flute. Her smile was the kind that fed on humiliation. It's better this way, Ethan. A man like you shouldn't be held back by emotions. Harriet Cole, his mother, stood behind them, arms folded like a queen at her son's coronation. She's had it too easy, she said coldly. Maybe this will teach her where she belongs. At the gate, Karen Lewis, the neighbor who always pretended concern, stood filming quietly on her phone. I'm sorry, Isabel, she murmured, though her hand never stopped recording. Isabel's breath came in quick, broken bursts. The cold air bit into her bare shoulders. You're humiliating me, Ethan. Please stop, let's talk inside. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Talk? I've been doing all the talking for years. You just never listened. You think you deserve my world? You were lucky to live in it. Her hands trembled, clutching a small envelope from her pocket, the one her late father had given her before he died. On it, written in his handwriting, "Open when the world turns its back on you." Ethan snatched it from her hand and held it up mockingly. Another one of your father's useless promises? She stared back, calm despite the tears in her eyes. You wouldn't understand, Ethan. My father built legacies, not egos. He threw the envelope at her feet. Then go build yours somewhere else. As he turned, Greg Sutton, his CFO, clapped him on the back. Well done, boss. Clean break before the new fiscal year. Smart move. Ethan grinned, feeding on the validation. Exactly. No baggage. No weakness. Clara nodded approvingly. The press will spin this in your favor. A self-made man freeing himself from a failed marriage, it's good optics. Isabel heard every word, every dagger dressed as advice. And though her heart shattered, something new began to form in its place resolve. She bent slowly, picked up the envelope from the wet ground, and whispered, Thank you, Father. When she looked up again, her tears were gone. Only fire remained in her eyes. The gate closed behind her with a metallic thud, echoing through the night like a verdict. The crowd of onlookers, neighbors, drivers, house staff watched in silence as the mansion lights dimmed behind her. In the distance, a single black car pulled up. A soft female voice called out, Mrs. Hale? You need a ride? Isabel turned. The woman behind the wheel wore a nurse's uniform, Grace Whitman, a stranger who would soon become her greatest ally. Isabel took one last look at the mansion and whispered, He just made the worst decision of his life. The rain washed over her as she stepped into the car, her past collapsing behind her, her future waiting quietly in the dark. As Grace's car disappeared into the rain, the camera lingered on the envelope in Isabel's lap, the wax seal glistening under the dashboard light. Inside it, a truth waited, one that would shake the man who just threw her away. If you're watching this, and you haven't subscribed yet, please, take a second to do it now. Every click, every share, every comment helps us keep telling stories that give strength to women and children who've been broken, forgotten, or silenced. When you subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're standing beside survivors, saying their stories matter. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story that could change a life. And in the comments, tell us where are you watching from and what part of this story spoke to your heart. The car engine hummed against the storm. Isabel Hale sat silently in the passenger seat, her face pale under the dim dashboard light. Rain streaked across the glass like a curtain of grief. The sealed envelope lay on her lap, its wax seal glistening deep red, the last thing her father had ever written to her. Mrs. Hale, said the woman driving softly, I'm Grace Whitman. I work night shifts at the community clinic downtown. Her tone was warm, but careful. She had recognized Isabel. Everyone in the city had seen her on the news beside the new millionaire. Isabel forced a faint smile. Thank you for stopping, Grace. I didn't know where else to go. Grace nodded. You don't have to explain. Sometimes the world shows its true face at night. As the car passed the edge of the city, Isabel's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. Message. He's already in the press room. He's telling them you were unstable. Her hand trembled. A second later, a photo appeared, Ethan Hale, standing on a podium, arm around Clara Monroe, smiling for reporters. Grace saw the screen. Is that your husband? Isabel's voice cracked. No, that's the man I thought was my husband. She turned to look out the window, watching the lights blur into streaks of gold and gray. The world that once belonged to her now felt like a stranger's reflection. Grace parked near an old gas station when the rain grew heavier. "Let's stop for a bit," she said. "You need air." The storm roared outside. Isabel stepped out, the cold soaking through her gown instantly. She clutched the envelope tighter, whispering, "Father, please, give me strength." A car passed by a black SUV. Inside, Greg Sutton, Ethan's CFO, was speaking on speakerphone. "Yes, sir," Greg said to Ethan. "The board thinks throwing her out was smart. Keeps investors calm." Clara's drafting the statement. "We'll control the narrative." Ethan's voice came through the line. "Good. The sooner the world forgets Isabel Hale, the better." The SUV sped off, splashing muddy water across the road, hitting Isabel's dress like a cruel punctuation mark. Grace rushed out, grabbing her hand. "You're freezing. Come inside!" But Isabel didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the taillights disappearing into the storm. "They're burying me alive," she whispered, voice steady but hollow. Grace wrapped her coat around her. "Then let's not let them. I've seen too many people fall apart after betrayal. You can stay at my place tonight." Isabel nodded weakly. Her knees buckled as they reached the car door. Grace caught her before she hit the ground. Her pulse fluttered, her skin cold. "Stay with me, Mrs. Hale," Grace shouted, tapping her cheek. The last thing Isabel saw before the world faded was the envelope slipping from her hand, landing on the wet ground, the wax seal breaking open slightly, revealing the first word inside, "Trustee." As Grace lifted Isabel's unconscious body into the car, her eyes fell on the paper, half visible through the torn envelope. The name Carter Holdings Trustee Division gleamed faintly through the rain, hinting at a legacy powerful enough to rewrite everything Ethan believed he controlled. The flashbulbs burned like fire. Ethan Hale stepped onto the stage in a sleek black suit, flanked by his advisor Clara Monroe and CFO Greg Sutton. The backdrop behind them blazed with bold white letters. "Hale Constructs the Future Begins Now." "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan boomed, smiling for the cameras, "tonight marks a new era. $100 million contract, a vision reborn, and a company destined for greatness." Applause erupted. Investors clapped, journalists leaned forward, and Clara's hand rested lightly on his arm, a gesture calculated for the cameras. Ethan tilted his head slightly toward her, whispering, "Keep smiling. We own the room now." Greg, standing nearby, whispered to Paula King, the gossip columnist covering the event, "He's unstoppable. Even his divorce is working in his favor." Paula scribbled notes eagerly. "America loves a man who wins alone," she said. Ethan raised their glass of champagne. "To independence," he declared, "and to cutting ties that weigh us down." A few in the audience chuckled knowingly. The rumor about his wife's eviction had already spread online. Every cruel whisper only fed his pride. Later that night, in his office overlooking the skyline, Ethan loosened his tie and stared at the glowing city below. Clara poured him another drink. "You handled the press perfectly," she said, sliding onto the edge of his desk. "You turned a scandal into a success story." Ethan smirked. "Scandal is just another kind of publicity." She leaned closer. "And the wife?" "Gone," he said coldly. "She'll fade like a bad headline." Greg entered with a folder in hand. "There's one thing, boss," he said cautiously. "Clause 7.4 inches the contract. Carter Infrastructure requested founder heir verification. It's some legal requirement for long-term funding." I flagged it. Ethan waved him off. "Legal fluff. Just sign what they send." Greg hesitated. "It's tied to the trust ownership structure. I couldn't find the founder's name. It's sealed under Carter Holdings." "Then leave it," Ethan snapped. "I didn't fight my way to the top to drown in paperwork." Clara nodded quickly, smoothing the tension. "Greg, you worry too much. The only name that matters now is Ethan Hale." Greg forced a laugh. "Of course, boss." The room fell quiet. Only the sound of the city buzzed beyond the glass. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his face lit by the skyline. "In this world," he said, "you either win or disappear. And I don't disappear." Clara smiled thinly. "Then, let's make you unforgettable." As the night deepened, Greg left the office first, his expression uneasy. Outside, he made a quick call. "Yeah," he whispered into his phone. "There's something strange about this Carter contract. I think Someone's watching. From the shadows, a sleek car parked across the street flashed its headlights once a signal. Inside sat Detective Ryan Stone, an investigator from Carter Holdings' financial division. Following the money trail, he muttered into his recorder, "Ethan Hale, target confirmed. Begin internal audit tomorrow." As Detective Stone's car disappeared into the night, the city lights flickered briefly. One of them reflected off a hospital sign miles away, where Grace Whitman stood beside an unconscious Isabel. Two stories, once divided by cruelty, were now moving toward a collision neither of them could stop. The first sound Isabel heard was the beep of a heart monitor. Her eyelids fluttered open to pale morning light pouring through a hospital window. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then the sharp scent of antiseptic hit her, and the memories rushed in the rain. The gate, Ethan's voice shouting, "Get out!" "Easy," said Grace Whitman, her soft voice steady. She stood beside the bed in a nurse's uniform, hair tied back neatly, a look of calm strength on her face. "You fainted last night near the station. You were lucky I found you before the rain got worse." Isabel tried to sit up. Pain pulsed behind her eyes. "How long was I out?" "Almost 10 hours," Grace replied gently. "You were exhausted, dehydrated, and running a fever. But you'll recover." On the bedside table lay the envelope now torn open. Isabel's heart raced. She reached for it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in her father's handwriting. "My dearest Isabel, if you're reading this, it means the world has shown its cruelty. But remember, what they take from you in pride, you will reclaim in truth. The company I built, Carter Holdings, will one day be yours. The trustees will contact you when betrayal finds you." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched the paper. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew this would happen." Grace watched, quietly. "Who was your father?" "Richard Carter," Isabel said softly. "He built one of the biggest infrastructure empires in the country, but after he died, everything went to trust. I thought it was gone." Grace's eyes widened. "Wait, Carter Infrastructure Group? That's the same name your husband mentioned on the news." Isabel's breath caught. "He signed a contract with my company." Grace leaned closer. "Does he know?" "No," Isabel said, shaking her head slowly. "And I won't tell him. Not yet." The room fell silent except for the hum of machines. For the first time in days, Isabel felt something stir inside her, not anger, but purpose. Then the door opened. A man in a gray suit stepped in. "Mrs. Hale?" Isabel looked up. "Who are you?" "Marcus Levine," he said, offering a card. "I'm the family attorney assigned by your late father's trust. The board has been waiting for your signal." "My signal?" He smiled faintly. "The envelope. Your father left instructions that we activate his succession plan once it was opened." Grace gasped. "You mean she?" Marcus nodded. "She's now the majority owner of Carter Holdings, including Carter Infrastructure Group. Every contract they sign is technically under her authority." Isabel's eyes widened, disbelief battling clarity. "So Ethan's entire empire," Marcus finished her thought, "depends on your signature." Isabel sank back into the pillow, her pulse racing. The same man who called her worthless was now standing on her foundation and had no idea. Her father's last line echoed in her mind. "When the world betrays you, the truth becomes your crown." She looked toward the window, sunlight cutting through the clouds. "Then it's time I start building again." But in the hallway, unseen, a figure lingered. Greg Sutton, her husband's CFO, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah," he whispered to Ethan. "You're not gonna like what I just heard." As Grace closed the hospital curtains, the reflection in the window showed Greg outside on the phone, his silhouette half lit by the fading sun. His words carried softly through the glass. "Boss, your wife isn't who you think she is." The printer spat out paper after paper, each one a revelation of deceit. Inside Marcus Levine's law office, stacks of financial records covered the table. Contracts, invoices, and digital screenshots painted the same picture. Ethan Hale's empire was built on fraud. "He's been moving company funds into shell accounts," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Fake consultancy fees, ghost suppliers, and offshore payments signed under Carter Infrastructure's contract. He's bleeding your company dry without realizing you own it." Isabel Hale stood still, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "He stole from me," she whispered, "and he doesn't even know it." Beside her, Grace Whitman poured her a cup of tea. Then, We make him know the right way, she said softly, with proof. Charlotte Reeves, a forensic accountant introduced by Marcus, stepped forward with a calm professionalism that cut through the tension. I've traced the money through 5 accounts. All roads lead to Hale Constructs. It's not just theft, it's embezzlement. Marcus leaned back. We'll need more than numbers. We need leverage. Something public, undeniable, and timed perfectly. Isabel looked toward the window, where sunlight cut through the blinds in sharp lines. My father used to say, never fight in the dark. Wait for the spotlight, then step into it. Charlotte smiled faintly. He was right. If we expose Ethan during an audit or a media event, his allies will turn on him before he can lie. Grace crossed her arms. He has allies. All right, and they're dangerous. Clara's managing his image, Greg's covering the accounts, and his mother's feeding the press with pity stories. He's building a shield. Marcus nodded. Then we'll build one stronger. He handed Isabel a folder stamped Confidential Trust. Carter Holdings primary owner, Isabel Hale. Her eyes widened. This makes it official? Yes, Marcus said. You're not just an heir now. You're the majority owner. With this, you can request a full audit of Hale Constructs. Isabel took a long breath. For the first time, her fear shifted into focus. Then that's what I'll do. I'll audit my husband. Charlotte looked impressed. Bold. You'll need someone inside to feed information quietly. Grace stepped forward. Leave that to me. People talk to nurses, even those who visit their offices. Marcus smiled approvingly. Then we move fast. Once the audit begins, Ethan will panic. Pride always falls louder than silence. The sound of a notification buzzed through the room. Isabel picked up her phone. It was a breaking news headline. Ethan Hale to attend charity gala as guest of honor, hosted by Carter Holdings. Her eyes met Marcus's. Carter Holdings? He frowned. That's your company. Grace's face paled. He's walking straight into your stage, Isabel. Isabel's lips curved into a calm, determined smile. Then let him shine under my light, Marcus whispered. Careful. He still has people everywhere. If Greg finds out. But before he could finish, Isabel's phone buzzed again. A message. From unknown. He knows. Her hand froze midair, eyes widening as the screen dimmed. As the camera lingered on Isabel's reflection in the office window, her phone screen flickered again, a hidden attachment opening by itself. A photo of her leaving the hospital appeared, time-stamped only an hour ago. Somewhere Ethan was already watching. The whiskey glass shattered before it hit the wall. Who leaked this? Ethan Hale shouted, his voice echoing through his office. His face was red with fury, his eyes wild. On the TV screen behind him, a news ticker scrolled. Carter Holdings orders full audit of Hale Constructs. Clara Monroe, standing near his desk, tried to keep her voice calm. Ethan, this doesn't mean anything yet. We can spin it. Spin it, he snapped. They're auditing me, Clara. And you told me Carter Holdings was just a faceless company with old investors. Clara's lips trembled slightly. That's what Greg said. Ethan turned sharply toward Greg Sutton, who stood stiffly by the door, sweat forming at his temple. You told me they were hands off, Greg. Who's running it now? Greg swallowed hard. We don't know. The ownership records are sealed. The trust documents don't list a public heir. Ethan grabbed him by the collar. Find out. I don't care if you have to bribe the entire board. Someone's behind this and I want a name. Harriet Cole, Ethan's mother, entered the office, her pearls glinting under the light. Ethan, calm down. You're losing control, and people are watching. He pointed at the door. People are talking, Mother. They're saying Carter Holdings is about to swallow me whole. Harriet straightened her back. Then you need to remind them who you are. Host a dinner. Call the press, show strength. Clara nodded quickly, jumping in. She's right. If you act weak now, the media will destroy you. Let's frame this as a routine partnership check. Say you welcome the audit. Ethan exhaled sharply, pacing. Welcome it? They're digging through my accounts. Clara stepped closer, touching his arm. You'll smile through it. You've done worse. You turned throwing your wife out into a success story, didn't you? That line hit him harder than expected. For a moment, he froze. A flicker of guilt crossed his face, but it vanished just as fast. She was a distraction, he muttered. I'm better off. Greg looked down. There's something else. The Carter audit notice, it was personally signed by the company's majority owner. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Name? Greg hesitated, his voice trembling. Isabel Hale. The room fell silent. Ethan blinked, stunned. That's impossible. She's gone, Clara whispered. She was your wife. Harriet gasped. You said she disappeared. Are you saying she's behind Carter Holdings? Ethan's fist clenched. No, she's not that smart. But the color drained from his face. The contract, the clause, the inheritance, it all began to connect like shards of glass aligning in the dark. He stormed toward the window, staring at the city lights. His reflection looked older, fractured. If she's alive, she's playing a game she can't win. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. Then make sure she loses. Ethan turned slowly, his eyes cold. Find her. I want everything, where she is, who she's with, what she's planning. Greg nodded shakily, already dialing his phone. Outside, the rain began to fall again. Lightning flashed against the skyline, reflecting on Ethan's glass window like cracks crawling across the surface of his empire. Far below, a car waited at the curb. Inside it sat Detective Ryan Stone, watching the office light flicker. He spoke quietly into his recorder. Subjects beginning to panic. Phase 2 surveillance expansion. As Ethan stood before the window, lightning flashed again, illuminating his reflection split perfectly in two. Half of him triumphant, half of him terrified. And somewhere across the city, Isabel opened her eyes to a message from Marcus. The board approved your audit request. The cameras flashed like lightning when the glass doors opened. Reporters turned instantly, voices overlapping. Is that her? Isabel Hale alive? Mrs. Hale, are the rumors true about the audit? Dressed in a crisp cream suit, Isabel Hale walked calmly into the marble lobby of the Carter Foundation for Women, her own newly launched organization under the Carter Holdings banner. Her steps were steady, her expression serene. Inside, her silence spoke louder than any press statement ever could. Behind her walked Grace Whitman, the nurse-turned-aide, now holding a file instead of a stethoscope. Keep your head up, Grace whispered. You don't owe them pain anymore. Marcus Levine, her lawyer, joined them, flanked by 2 security guards. Smile once, he murmured. They need to see power, not pity. Isabel gave the faintest nod. At the podium, she adjusted the microphone. Good morning, she began. This foundation exists to help women rebuild after betrayal, loss, or manipulation. Because I know firsthand being broken doesn't mean being defeated. The room stilled. Cameras clicked in rhythmic bursts. A few reporters looked ashamed. Others hung on her every word. In the back corner, Nora Keene, a journalist known for exposing corporate corruption, watched silently. Her eyes flicked from Isabel to the Carter Holdings logo behind her, then back to her notepad. Marcus noticed and leaned toward Grace. That's Nora Keene. She's investigating Hale constructs. If we're lucky, she'll connect the dots soon. Isabel finished her speech with quiet conviction. Dignity, she said, isn't lost when you're betrayed, it's reclaimed when you rise again. The audience erupted in applause. For the first time, Isabel didn't shrink from the spotlight. Later that evening, in the Foundation's quiet office, Isabel sat reviewing reports from Charlotte Reeves, the forensic accountant. Charlotte spread the spreadsheets across the table. We've confirmed the audit starts Monday. Hale Constructs will have to release all financial statements. Once the discrepancies surface, it'll be public. Grace exhaled. Then it begins. Marcus nodded. But we move carefully. Ethan's people will fight back. Let them, Isabel replied. I've already fought worse battles in silence. Grace placed a hand over hers. You're stronger than the woman he threw out, Isabel. Isabel smiled faintly. That woman died at his doorstep. This one was born in the rain. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered against the dark, a quiet reflection of the storm that was about to come. Marcus's phone buzzed. He frowned and turned the screen toward Isabel. Look at this. It was a live stream thumbnail. Breaking news, Ethan Hale to attend Carter Holdings charity gala this weekend. Charlotte's jaw dropped. He's walking straight into your event? Marcus grimaced. He must think you won't show up. He's making it his stage. Isabel leaned back slowly, her expression unreadable. Then it's time to remind him whose stage it really is. Grace's eyes widened. You mean you're going? Isabel stood, calm but resolute. Yes, Let him perform under my lights. As the team watched her walk toward the window, her reflection merged with the city skyline, half shadow, half flame. Then, a faint knock came from the office door. Nora Keene stepped inside, holding a file. "Mrs. Hale," she said, her tone cautious but intrigued. "I think I found something you'll want to see." The ballroom shimmered with gold and deceit. Under the glow of 1,000 chandeliers, Ethan Hale walked through the Carter Holdings charity gala as if he owned the room. Cameras flashed, investors applauded, and every smile around him fed his delusion of control. He adjusted his cufflinks, whispering to Clara Monroe, "Tonight they'll forget the audit. By morning, I'll be the face of redemption." Clara smiled tightly. "You're brilliant, Ethan. You always turn the story around." Across the hall, Harriet Cole, his mother, greeted donors with that same cold elegance. "My son is misunderstood," she told one of the reporters. "He's just a man too ambitious for ordinary hearts." But ambition was about to meet its reckoning. The orchestra paused, the lights dimmed, and then the crowd turned as Isabel Hale stepped through the glass doors. She wore a black silk gown that caught every glint of light, walking with quiet poise that silenced even gossip. Gasps rippled through the hall. The woman Ethan humiliated, the wife he threw out, was alive and radiant. Ethan froze mid-sentence, his smile cracking. "It can't be," he whispered. Clara's grip on his arm tightened. "Smile," she hissed. "Everyone's watching." Isabel walked straight to the podium. Marcus Levine, Grace Whitman, and Charlotte Reeves followed behind her like a silent army. "Good evening," Isabel began, her voice calm and clear. "Before we celebrate generosity, I'd like to introduce myself properly. I am Isabel Carter Hale, majority shareholder and CEO of Carter Holdings." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Journalists raised cameras, investors leaned forward. Ethan's face drained of color. "That's impossible," he muttered, turning to Greg. "She can't," Greg Sutton, sweating, whispered. "She can. The documents were real. She owns everything." Isabel's eyes met Ethan's. "My late father left this company under a trust that activates upon betrayal. Tonight, I stand not as your wife, but as the woman you tried to destroy and the owner of the empire you thought was yours." The silence was electric. Clara's expression twisted into panic. Harriet's lips parted, speechless for the first time. Then Ethan laughed, brittle and loud. "You think this changes anything? You wouldn't survive a week in my world." Marcus stepped forward, holding up a document. "Actually, she already has. And the board just voted to initiate a full internal takeover of Hale Constructs, effective immediately." A flash of cameras, a roar of murmurs. Ethan's hand slammed against the table. "This is a setup." Isabel didn't flinch. "No, Ethan, it's an audit, and your signature made it possible." The crowd gasped. Clara dropped her champagne glass, the sound sharp as truth. Security guards entered discreetly through the side doors, Detective Ryan Stone among them, dressed in plain clothes. He nodded subtly toward Isabel. The investigation was now official. Ethan's voice faltered, rage flickering into fear. You planned this?" Isabel's answer was calm, almost kind. "No, Ethan. You did. Every lie you told built the bridge to this moment." She turned to the audience, her tone unwavering. "Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about truth." The crowd applauded, thunderous and overwhelming. Cameras flashed, recording the empire's silent shift of power. Ethan stood frozen in humiliation, trapped under the lights he once craved. But as Isabel walked away, her phone buzzed. She glanced down a message. "No sender. Be careful. He won't fall quietly." As Isabel stepped off the stage, the camera lingered on Ethan's reflection in a shattered wine glass. His eyes burned with fury, and just before the scene faded to black, he whispered to Clara, "If I go down, she's coming with me." Papers flew across the office like a hurricane of guilt. Ethan Hale slammed his fist on the desk, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. "They froze my accounts," he shouted. "All of them. How did this happen overnight?" Greg Sutton, the CFO, flinched. "It's the audit team. They move faster than we thought. Every transaction tied to offshore transfers is under review." Ethan pointed at him sharply. "You were supposed to clean those records. I paid you to make this disappear." Greg swallowed. "I tried. But their forensic accountant, Charlotte Reeves, she found everything. They even have digital traces of your approval emails. Ethan's voice cracked into fury. She's her ally. Isabel's fingerprints are all over this. From the doorway, Clara Monroe entered in a rush, phone in hand. Ethan, calm down. The press is already running with the story. The headline says, Audit exposes massive fraud at Hale constructs Carter Holdings to take control. He stared at her, disbelief turning into dread. Control? She's taking my company? Clara nodded weakly. Marcus Levine filed legal papers this morning. She's demanding full restitution under the ownership clause. Ethan turned toward the window, gripping the blinds so hard they bent. Everything I built, everything was mine before she walked in. Harriet Cole, his mother, appeared in the doorway, her posture still regal but her face drawn. Then why does it all have her name on it now? He spun around. Mother, not you too. I warned you, Harriet snapped. You let pride blind you. You turned our allies into enemies. Even your lawyer stopped answering your calls. Greg muttered under his breath. And the investors are pulling out. They don't want to be tied to fraud charges. Ethan slammed his phone against the wall. No one walks away from me. Clara tried to touch his arm, but he shoved her hand away. You said this was under control. You told me I could manipulate the story. Clara's eyes narrowed. I said you could shape a story, not erase a crime. I'm not going down with you. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, lips parting. Oh my God. They've issued a warrant. Greg's eyes widened. For who? She swallowed. You, Ethan. Silence. Ethan's face drained of all color. You're lying. But the sound of footsteps filled the hall heavy, official, inevitable. Two men in dark suits entered, led by Detective Ryan Stone. His badge gleamed in the cold light. Ethan Hale, Ryan said calmly. You're under investigation for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. You'll need to come with us. Ethan tried to speak, but his throat tightened. Do you know who I am? Ryan met his eyes steadily. A man who thought power meant immunity. The room spun. Ethan's empire, his illusion shattered before him. Harriet turned away in shame. Clara's expression hardened. Greg stayed silent, eyes fixed on the floor. As they cuffed Ethan, flashes from outside filled the glass windows, the press already waiting. His downfall was public, merciless, and loud. Through the chaos, Ryan leaned close and whispered, She didn't destroy you, Ethan. You destroyed yourself. The door slammed shut behind them. In the sudden silence, Clara's phone buzzed again. She read the message aloud, her voice trembling. Don't leave town. You're next. Outside the flashing lights, Isabel watched from a black car parked across the street, her reflection calm in the window. Grace's voice broke the silence beside her. He's falling, Isabel. Isabel replied softly. Not yet. The truth still has one more chapter to write. The sound of sirens drowned out his pride. Ethan Hale stumbled out of the courthouse in handcuffs, his expensive suit soaked with rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. Cameras flashed from every direction. Reporters shouted questions that stabbed deeper than any knife. Mr. Hale, is it true you forged company documents? Did your wife expose you? How does it feel losing everything to the woman you called useless? Ethan's jaw clenched, his face twitched under the barrage of light. No comment, he muttered through gritted teeth, but his voice shook. Beside him, Detective Ryan Stone maintained a firm grip on his arm. Keep moving, Mr. Hale. His tone was steady, but there was a trace of pity in his eyes. From the crowd's edge, Clara Monroe watched behind dark glasses. She had once been proud to stand next to him. Now, she hid in the shadows. When Greg Sutton approached she didn't even look at him. They're going to drag me in next, Greg said, voice trembling. Clara finally turned to him. You helped him lie, Greg. What did you think would happen? That arrogance never comes with a bill? Across the street, behind the tinted window of a black car, Isabel Hale sat silently, watching the man she once called husband become the face of humiliation. Beside her, Grace Whitman whispered, Do you want me to tell Marcus we should leave? Isabel didn't answer immediately. Her eyes followed Ethan as he was pushed into the police car. No, she said softly. Let the world see what pride does when truth arrives. Grace looked at her with quiet admiration. You could have stopped this, you know. You could have settled privately. I could have, Isabel said. But he never gave me that mercy. The car door slammed. The cameras captured the moment the once celebrated CEO, drenched, broken and silent, his empire crumbling in full view. Inside the courthouse, Harriet Cole stood alone in the corridor, makeup running, her pearls dull under the harsh light. Reporters ignored her now. She clutched her purse and whispered, "He was supposed to be untouchable." Behind her, Clara's voice cut through the silence. "No one's untouchable, Mrs. Cole, especially when they forget who gave them the crown." Harriet turned, eyes filled with venom. "You're the reason my son fell." Clara smirked faintly. "No." He tripped over his own ego. Meanwhile, Marcus Levine and Charlotte Reeves held a press conference outside the Carter Foundation building. Marcus's voice was measured. "Justice isn't vengeance. It's restoration. Every stolen cent will return to Carter Holdings investors," Charlotte added, "and to the Women's Foundation created in Mrs. Hale's name." The reporters scribbled furiously. One asked, "Where is Mrs. Hale right now?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Exactly where? She's supposed to be watching the truth speak for itself." Inside her car, Isabel exhaled, the first breath of peace she'd felt in years. But as she looked out the window, something strange caught her eye. Across the street, Clara Monroe was speaking to a man in a dark trench coat, passing him a sealed envelope. Grace noticed too. "Who's that?" Isabel's gaze sharpened. "Someone's still playing a dangerous game." The man nodded to Clara and slipped into the crowd, vanishing. The rain thickened, washing the courthouse steps clean, but the stain of deceit was far from gone. As Isabel's car pulled away, her phone buzzed with a private number. Grace picked it up and froze. A voice on the line whispered, "Tell Mrs. Hale. The man she just saw isn't finished yet." The gavel struck like thunder. "Court is now in session," announced Judge Harper, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. Cameras clicked from the press gallery. The world had come to watch the final chapter of Ethan Hale's downfall. Ethan sat at the defense table in a gray suit that once screamed power. Now it only hung heavy on his shoulders. His eyes were hollow, his jaw tight. Beside him sat Clara Monroe, pretending calm, but her trembling hands gave her away. Across the aisle, Isabel Hale entered with quiet grace, dressed in a navy suit. Marcus Levine walked beside her, carrying a stack of documents, while Grace Whitman and Charlotte Reeves sat in the front row for support. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Judge Harper adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Hale, you stand accused of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of financial records tied to Carter Holdings. How do you plead?" Ethan's voice was low. "Not guilty." A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus stood calmly. "Your Honor, the prosecution is ready to present new evidence." Clara leaned close to Ethan and whispered, "Stay quiet. I can fix this." He shot her a venomous fire. "Look, you've fixed enough already." Marcus opened a folder and handed the bailiff a stack of emails, signed checks, and audio transcripts. "These are direct communications between Ethan Hale, CFO Greg Sutton, and advisor Clara Monroe, proving coordinated financial fraud and attempted media manipulation." Clara's eyes widened. "That's not possible. Those were deleted." Charlotte stood from the front row. "You forgot the backups on the company's cloud drive. We recovered everything." The courtroom buzzed. Judge Harper raised a hand. "Order!" Ethan's face twisted. "You think this proves I'm guilty? Everyone does what it takes to survive in business." Isabel's calm voice cut through the noise. "No, Ethan. You did what it took to destroy." He glared at her, rage and shame colliding. "You think you're better than me because of your father's name? You'd be nothing without it." She met his gaze evenly. "And you'd still have everything if you hadn't tried to steal it." The gallery fell silent. For the first time, Ethan looked small not because of the trial, but because of the woman he'd underestimated. Marcus handed one last folder to the judge. "This is the transfer record proving that all of Hale Construct's assets were funneled through Carter Holdings under a dormant ownership clause. In short, Your Honor, Mr. Hale stole from his wife." Gasps filled the courtroom. Ethan's head dropped. Clara paled. Judge Harper leaned forward. "Miss Monroe, given your involvement, do you wish to testify?" Clara hesitated, then her composure shattered. "Yes, Your Honor." He ordered everything. "Every transfer, every lie, it was all him." Ethan exploded. "You liar!" The guard stepped in. Clara burst into tears, hands shaking. "He said no one would ever find out." Judge Harper's voice rose over the chaos. "Enough. This court will reconvene for sentencing tomorrow." As the gavel slammed, the reporters surged. Flash bulbs exploded. Ethan's face crumbled under the light. Marcus turned to Isabel. "It's over." But Isabel's expression darkened. "No," she said quietly. "Not yet." At the edge of the courtroom, a man in a dark trench coat slipped a small envelope into the judge's clerk's hand. The label read, "Confidential Internal Affairs." The clerk glanced toward Isabel, then quickly hid it under the papers. As Isabel stepped outside the courthouse, the crowd cheered, cameras flashing like fireworks. But in the chaos, Detective Ryan Stone approached Marcus quietly and murmured, "We just got new information. The money trail doesn't end with Ethan Hale." The courtroom doors burst open. A single envelope dropped to the floor between Judge Harper's shoes, the label half smudged by rain. Confidential Internal Affairs. Inside it, a revelation waited that would change everything one last time. Moments later, in chambers, Detective Ryan Stone stood before the judge, Marcus Levine, and Isabel Hale. The judge's face was pale. "Mrs. Hale," he said, sliding the papers across the table, "the investigation found another account in your name." The air froze. Grace Whitman gasped. Charlotte Reeves, who'd analyzed every record, frowned in disbelief. "That can't be right. Isabel never touched those funds." Marcus quickly scanned the pages. "Your Honor, this isn't her doing. This was planted." Ryan nodded grimly. "We traced the transfers. It's a frame job created right after the gala." "By who?" Grace whispered. Ryan hesitated. "Clara Monroe." Silence. Then the gavel struck the desk once, echoing like a heartbeat. Judge Harper exhaled. "Detective, proceed." "Mrs. Hale, you may remain. This concerns you directly." Downstairs, the media storm swirled. Reporters shouted from the courthouse steps, cameras flashing like lightning. Ethan sat in a holding cell nearby. His pride stripped bare. He stared blankly at the wall, unaware that the very woman who'd betrayed him, Clara, had just turned against Isabel to save herself again. In another room, Clara trembled under interrogation. "She has everything," she spat, eyes wild. "The company, the name, the sympathy. I wanted her to feel what I felt, small." Detective Stone crossed his arms. "You forged evidence, Clara. You could go to prison for obstruction." Clara laughed bitterly. "Then at least people will finally say my name." He shook his head slowly. "You'll never understand. That's exactly why she won." Meanwhile, Isabel sat quietly in the judge's chamber as Marcus handed over proof, backup files showing the fake transactions Clara created. The truth cut through the last lie. Judge Harper nodded. "Mrs. Hale, you're cleared. The audit will stand. The assets will be restored in full." Isabel let out a slow breath, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Your Honor." Ryan gave a small smile. "It's over now." But Isabel shook her head softly. "No, Detective, justice is over. Healing begins." Outside, the sky broke open into sunlight. Reporters swarmed as Isabel stepped out, the courthouse behind her now just a shadow. Grace and Charlotte followed close, and Marcus gave a short statement to the press. This case was never about revenge, it was about truth. A journalist called out, "Mrs. Hale, what happens next?" Isabel paused at the steps, the golden light hitting her face. "Next," she said quietly, "we rebuild. Not just companies, but people." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras caught her calm smile, not victorious, but free. At the bottom of the steps, she turned to Grace. "Start the paperwork for the Carter Foundation expansion. Let's make sure no woman ever feels powerless again." Grace nodded, eyes shining. "Your father would be proud." Isabel looked up at the sky. "I hope he sees it." That evening, at the Carter Foundation's new headquarters, she stood by the window overlooking the city, the same skyline where Ethan once ruled. The lights shimmered like scattered memories. Marcus joined her quietly. "He was sentenced today, 7 years. She nodded slowly. "Then may he use them to learn what love without control means." He smiled. "And you?" "I'll use mine to give others what I needed back then. Hope." Across town, Ethan sat alone in his cell. No mirrors, no spotlight, just silence. From the hallway, a guard's voice echoed faintly. "Mail call." A single envelope slid under his door. No return address. Inside, a single line written in Isabel's handwriting. "Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom." A tear rolled down his cheek as the cell light flickered. Back at the foundation, Isabel closed her office door and turned off the lights. Through the glass wall, the city glowed alive. Endless, renewed. Grace entered quietly. "Everything's ready for tomorrow's opening." "Good," Isabel said softly. "Tomorrow, we start again." She looked once more at her reflection, the woman who had been thrown out, broken, forgotten, now standing tall, unshaken, whole. The faint echo of thunder rolled in the distance, but this time, she smiled. Because storms didn't scare her anymore. They built her wings. As the foundation's lights glowed through the night, the camera panned up to the sky, the Carter logo reflected on the glass. And beneath it, etched in gold letters, "Built from betrayal, standing for hope." The end.